mom raised me well, and I used to put it.
So let me ask you an honest question. Is anyone saying to themselves, we don't have professional, we don't have resources to have me go through certification? Right, so what I want to say to you is that everything has to start with a small seed, okay? It was someone's idea 10 years ago to offer some coaching at the University of Oklahoma. And I remember when the team came out to Florida State, because we were starting to do some coaching with our provost who met somebody who was doing coaching, and he was like, I want you to come in and do a little bit of training with our advisors. And then somehow, some way, that turned into some positions. So it started with one conversation with someone who was doing coaching in higher education. Same thing happened at OU. Same thing happened with me when I had this, this connection in my mind that, oh my gosh, we could be so much more effective if we're able to empower our students to do more of the work. So when I was asked to work with undecided students at Florida State, I thought to myself, I want to try these coaching techniques and let's just see what happens when we empower a student to do that soul searching, values, interests, strengths. Start to create maybe pamphlets, packets where they can do some of that work. Identify assessments and say, what would help you to feel more clear about your major? We discovered this assessment called mymajors.com. So we started having resources and we would say to students, would you like to commit? What is going to help move you forward with this major selection process? And then they started to commit. And then we said, would it be helpful to meet with you more regularly to help process? And that's how we built the program, is that they came in maybe once a month to talk about their progress. So these coaching techniques were starting to become infused into the program. We had no resources, and I'm talking zero. People and paper is pretty much all I had in my advising office, and I am not kidding when I say that. So it was just, okay, let's try to do this. So we have to start somewhere, and yes, we are very, very fortunate that we've been able to get the support to do this, but who knows what's possible? So I want to just say, anything is possible when you can start. And the other thing I want to say is there was a lot of intention that went to this workshop and then the other 4 workshops that are happening around the state, and that we're hoping and we're seeing that this is going to be a coaching coalition across the state of Oklahoma with at least 300 educators. And let's spread this. So this is what we're seeing. So I want you to feel not defeated that you don't have the coaching programs on your campus yet, but just hopeful that some good things are going to happen. And I'm already hearing, we're already doing peer coaching, but we need more skills, or we already would like to bring coaching into this or that. Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions about that? I just want to make sure that we're really clear about that you can just start with little, small, tiny practices and it can grow into incredible things. Now, the second thing I'm going to say is you're not going to love this, but I am going to ask you to stand up, not yet, and you have to find someone you do not know. I know. But when we're practicing coaching, and I already know your family, I've been to your house, I know the names of your pets, then it's a little hard to create that authentic coaching connection. It's much more important to connect with someone you don't know, because that's what helps you develop the skills and the confidence to be able to form those connections with your students who you may or may not know. Does that make sense? All right, so we're going to have what I call the awkward middle school moment, where you are going to stand up, you are going to find someone you don't know, and you're going to sit next to them, because when Casey introduces these skills, you're going to be practicing these skills. And we're going to just go over and reinforce what we covered in the ION model, but we're going to do a deeper dive into this section, okay? Good? All right, ready, set, go!
All right, y'all ready? Okay. You're going to get me for a little bit, all right? You ready? All right. So we've been flying at about 30,000 feet. Okay, so we've been talking a lot of big picture stuff. We've been talking a lot of big picture coaching stuff, and it's important. I think it's a good place to start. We kind of can take this large view, if you will, of coaching and this big, larger, general topic and context. But now we're going to start bringing it down a little bit. We're going to start bringing this plane a little bit down to ground level, and that really starts with what we're going to be going over over the next really kind of hour. All right, because this is where kind of the rubber meets the road. This is where you're coaching. All right, and these are what we train on. This is what we've been trained on, and this can be simply done. What we're about to do, this can be easily done and simply done on your campus with colleagues, with coworkers. We do this at OU. I mean, 8 years ago, with small little offices, student life, recruitment, whoever it was, and we do what we're about to do. And I think this can be really helpful for you, even taking it back to your campus that we'll talk about later. So we're going to start with this topic of the coaching mindset. All right, and it's something that isn't really necessarily thought of a lot. Even when Kathleen and I were at the national coaching thing in Colorado, in my group I brought this topic up, and there wasn't really a whole lot of talk about it. But to me, it all begins here. Everything working with a student and the success that you're going to have and the role that you're hoping to take begins with this coaching mindset. Right? How do we define mindset? Anybody? You're going to put a definition on mindset. Attitude. That's exactly right. It's a held belief of attitude. Right? It's a set attitude and an approach that you take to a situation. In this case, in the context that we're speaking to, the mindset that you take working with your students. That is so undervalued as far as how critical it is to the success of that relationship. Is what's going on between here. What's going on between here. So what we're going to talk about just for a minute is this mindset creates the culture. I don't know if you know this or not, but you have a culture in your office. In your individual office where a student walks through the door and they sit down across the desk from you, you have a culture. You have a larger culture in your campus, you have a culture as an office, but you also have an individual culture that you are in charge of and get to create. And that starts with your mindset and your approach and how you work with students individually. So I'm going to share with you some mindset, culture-infused thoughts and approaches that we take in our work, and that these have been learned and developed through a lot of practice and a lot of this isn't working and this does work, and this is helpful and this isn't helpful. And so I've listed some of these up here. So you can take a look at the screen, whichever one's closest to you. And the first one I have up here is I am not the expert. The student is the expert of their own life. That's in that NACADA definition as well. One thing we ask in our office sometimes, are students the expert in their own lives? There's a lot of smiles, right? Like this concept, really? Have you talked about that as a staff? Is that something you talk about? Like, hey, if we're going to believe in this concept of a student's an expert in their own life, what does that really mean? As an 18-year-old coming across campus, and no matter their background or out, the diverse of their background, first generation, whatever it might be, non-traditional student, right? How much of an expert are they? And how do we help facilitate and bring that out of them? Because we do believe that an individual knows what's best for them. And I will tell a student when we meet in the expectation meeting, and that first time I'll say, hey, listen, you are the expert. You know you better than you, but I'm going to help you hopefully grow in that so you become even a greater expert. All right. Next one, I'm only one spoke in the wheel. What do you think that means? What does it mean? I am only one spoke in the wheel.
There's a bigger picture.
There's a bigger picture. In what way?
You're only one part of the equation.
That's right. And I am referring to me as a coach. I'm referring to me as a coach. This is very important for the healthiness of your organization and the people trying to do this work. Is we want to be the end-all be-all sometimes. The one-stop shop. We are this little pocket of people here that's going to just solve it all. And when you're working with a student and you are 100% in and you are 2 feet in and you are committed, then a lot of times you believe it can be very dangerous to believe like it's up to you. And it's very healthy to remember that no, it's not up to you. You're one person in a larger, bigger scale of additional people and resources. And for us as coaches on our staff, I want them to have other connections on campus. I want them to have other people who are also supporting and working alongside of them, not just me. Not just me. That's very important. A student's success or lack thereof does not define me, right? So that goes into it a little bit. Students do not care what you know until you know you care, which is probably a lot of things that you all said, right? That just mindset of doing that. And here's some more. As a coach, this came from like probably the first year in our program. As a coach, I can't want it more than they do. How many of you sit across the desk from a student and feel like you want it more than them? And how aggravating and frustrating is that? You can't want it more than them or it's not going to work. So when you are feeling that, when you are experiencing that with a student, what do? I know what I do. I will sometimes just, in a working relationship, say, hey, Linda, I'm really feeling like I'm almost wanting you to be more successful than you. But is that true? Or where are we at with this? Because this is how I'm feeling based on some of these things. And a lot of times for a student, just hearing that, will be like, we'll set them back a little bit. And that's okay. Because sometimes they need to be set back a little bit in a healthy way. So you can't want it more than them or it's not going to work. It's a two-way street. We model respect and non-judgmental. We talked about that. It's so critical because you can derail yourself as a coach within the first 2 to 3 minutes of a coaching session, advising session, doesn't matter. If they feel like when they walk in your office, they're being judged. And I have had plenty of students who have walked in with a 32 on the exam. Right? 28, 40, right? They are not going to have success 24/7, right? But they cannot feel like you are in a judgment seat. Because if you're in a judgment seat, then credibility gone. They want to come to your office again? No. Right? So you have to create this culture that develops this non-judgmental approach. You can do that in different ways. One of the things I always tell students when I first see them and our expectation is, hey, first of all, I'm not the principal's office. And second of all, I'm not mom and dad. And one thing you can always know for sure is I am never going to tell you what to do. Never going to tell you what to do. And that just sets the stage a little bit differently. And you can operate in that way. Did I tell Teresa anything to do? No, because you can still get to action and you can still get to some of these things we do without you ever telling them what to do. So that non-judgmental approach is really, really important. Strength-based approach, which probably a lot of you are familiar with. And then when I do trainings, and especially with academic advisors, and as an academic advisor, I can understand too, we are not here to fix students. Rather, to assist them in providing and accessing their own resources. How many times do you feel like you just want to fix the problem? What has been happening in this generation of students' lives coming to our front doors now? What's been happening for them from their parents or other people? Their problems have been, for many of them, not all of them, but a lot of the students that we're seeing, when they have hit adversity, when they have hit challenges, there has been a lot of that taken care of for them sometimes. And a lot of those things have been handled right for them. And a lot of things have just been fixed, right? And we don't want to fix their stuff. That's not what we're paid to do. We want to help them to come up with their own solutions, come up with their own abilities, and build their own confidence that they can have their own resources, their own ability to solve some problems on their own, and trust them in that. Somebody maybe mentioned this earlier, and this is one of my favorite things, because a lot of times when people first start coaching, they are trying to really, okay, I got to go through this part of the phase, and this part of the model, and this part, and this part. I'm going to tell you right now that you are knocking it out of the park in your office if you sometimes just sit and create a space for listening and reflection, just to have a space that a student can come sit in and actually feel listened to. How often does that happen for us? How often, you think about it, in your own life, do you really feel like somebody's listening? I do this training this kind of coach training for incoming parents of students at OU, and then they all think that we just give them marriage counseling. You know, because we hit on this space and like all the dads all of a sudden have to go to the bathroom. But we hit on this and we're going to practice it, but just feeling listened to. And you talk about wanting to build a connection fast and build rapport quick. I promise. They start thinking, wow, I'm going to come in here and they're going to listen a lot. It makes a big difference. Individuals know what's right for them. And then finally, this last one on here, and this is just my personal one, I've shared it with my office. When I meet with a student, when we are creating the very, very first meeting, when I'm meeting with a student, and we're just starting to kind of get off the ground a little bit in August, one thing I tell them they can always expect, and it's important that they know what to expect when they're coming to your office. And I will say, here's what you can expect working with me, always, is that you are always going to feel like this is a place of encouragement. And I always want you to feel when you leave my office that you have less stress. Because how stressed out are students? How stressed out are we? I'm going to take your stress and put it on me. But I want you to feel less stress. And I always want you to feel like you have a plan to get better. And they understand that. They understand encouragement. They definitely understand going to an office and leaving and feeling less stressed than they did when they came back here. And I can tell you right now, that's one of the best ways to get them to come back, is when they know, man, when I go to my office, Casey's office, when I leave, I feel better. I just feel better. I feel more encouraged. I feel less stressed. And now, I have a plan to get better. It might be one simple little thing, but it's a plan. And that's how we create, from our mindset, a culture in an individual office. And I would encourage you, as you start thinking about what type of culture is being created in your office, as an individual, as a collective team. How are you communicating to students expectations of what it's like to work with you or what they can expect working with you? So it's not just this gray and nebulous area that they're just trying to guess, and you're trying to guess, and there's not really any clarity. And what are we doing to create expectations around how we're really trying to approach working with them? Because this comes from the mindset leads to the approach, right? Because everything I just described leads to how I approach a student, right? You all pointed it out. More questions, fewer directions. Languages of commitment, like we did with Teresa, right? Helping hold students accountable in a healthy way. The next one you see there is options, right? Most of the time, coaching is effective because people feel stuck, right? And many times our students feel stuck. And what do you do when you're trying to help them to develop options for getting unstuck? But they can't come up with options for themselves, right? That's a challenge. Somebody mentioned it earlier. And it happens, right? Many times I'm sitting with a student and they're stuck. I'm really struggling in economics right now. Casey, I'm like, okay, well, tell me, what are a few options you have? Well, I don't know. So I'll get what you get. Okay, what do you think? Could be a possibility. Of course, about 10 different things are running through my mind at this time. Like, I just don't really know what to do. I'm just feeling very stuck. And I'll say, okay, if I can see they're really stuck and they're having a hard time and we're processing a little bit, but we're not getting anywhere, here's what I do. I'll say, Veronica, would you like me to help you come up with some options? And they'll say, yes, that'd be great. And I'll say, great. One option I've seen work for a lot of students in this economics class is when they go to the economics tutoring that happens on Mondays and Wednesdays in the Adams Learning Center. But what do you think about that? Oh, that's a good idea. That's a good one. Yeah, it is a good one. I'll say, okay, so you think that's a good idea, right? How do you feel about that? What do you think about it? Then we start having a coaching kind of conversation about that option. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, when I give them one option like that, notice what I did. I asked them, do you mind if I give you an option of what I've seen work for a lot of students? They have invited me in to say, yeah, that would be great. Nobody's ever told me no yet. It's probably coming. But nobody's ever said, no, I don't want your option. They always say yes. But then it's their choice. It's not like I just went and said, Veronica, go to tutoring every Monday and Wednesday. Come on, it's no brainer, right? And so then they've invited me in. And every single time that happens, when we develop that option, guess what they do? All of a sudden, they got another idea. And then they got another idea. And then they got another idea. And it just sometimes is a spark. Sometimes it's just a spark that gets them going a little bit. But it always comes down to the best thing you can do to working with students is helping them develop their options. And when I maybe suggest tutoring, I am not telling them to go to tutoring. I am asking them, what do you think about that idea? And I've had many students say, I don't want to do that. Okay, that's cool. I was just saying something that I thought that I've seen be helpful to students, and what other ideas you got? So, feedback, offer and receive, that's approach. And then ultimately, what you're doing here, when we say students are the experts in their own lives, what you're doing in all this is you are doing this enhanced self-awareness. They are an expert in their life to a degree. But what coaching can do is it helps enhance their self-awareness about who they are, where they're trying to go, what their strengths are, what naturally has come good is that comes easy to them, but who they're becoming in this kind of out loud conversation that they are then starting to gain like, oh, okay, like I've learned something about myself. If you notice, I asked Teresa, what's something you learned about yourself in that first semester of your PhD? Because I wanted her to realize, because it's in there already, that she's already done some great things. There's some self-awareness already there that we just need to say out loud. That you just need to get the students to say out loud, because then boom. Wait a minute, I've done this. I've done hard things. Right? And then finally, one of my last things I will tell a student in that kind of expectations, I say, hey, you're the pilot. You're the pilot. I'm the co-pilot. And this fall semester, I might have to help you hold on a little bit more. But guess what I want to do? Right, I want you flying this plane on your own. And they can understand that. They can get that. And it's very easy for them to then understand in a visual way your role, and it doesn't seem like this real stuffy professional adult who's going to I'm going to come see, and they're going to kind of tell me what I need to do to be successful. Because that's what they expect. They expect when they come to our office that they're going to come in there, they're going to sit, and I'm going to tell them what they need to do to be successful, and then everything's going to be okay. But I'm really trying to help start building a different paradigm from a mindset to an approach with them. All right. So now we're going to start working on skills. Who in here has played sports before? A lot of us, right? Doesn't matter if you played sports or done something else. What's the key to being successful in sports? When a coach, what is a coach typically working on with an athlete? Practice what? Skills, fundamentals. Right? There's fundamentals. Right? And when a team is struggling, I used to work with Sherry Cole on the women's basketball team. I promise you, when we would go, I'd go to Lloyd Noble Center, and she'd have practice going, and if they came off a loss, you know what she did? She ran them to death on fundamentals. Like all of a sudden, these girls are in line practicing dribbling, which I did with my 5-year-old basketball team that I coached the Y. And these college Division I basketball players are now working on dribbling. Because she wanted to remind them that your success comes from the details. And it's the details of the fundamentals that makes you successful. And this, by far, is the most important. Trust, in a lot of ways. Right? It establishes everything. Right? It establishes everything. And building trust with each individual is different. There are some students right now that, man, we have a great trusting relationship since August. Boom. And they're stumped. We're still working on it. And it might not hit till January. I'm okay with that. That student's story, their past, might have them a little bit more guarded for a while. That's okay. So if you think about trust, let's kind of put it in the category of this establishing the connection from the model, right? Because that's where it's happening. So what I want you to do, and this is very simple, and it's just this kind of fun little establishing the connection practice we do sometimes in trainings or office and things like that, is the person next to you, just partner up, and I want you I'm going to give you just a couple minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, and I just want you to establish a connection with that person by identifying something in uncommon that you have in common. Something, and the more uncommon, the more you are ready to be a coach. All right? So I want you to just identify something uncommon that you have in common. All right? Okay? Right, I mean, okay, so this is a fun little game, but it's fun, right? Why is it fun?
You get to know the person. You need to talk about yourself.
That's why it's fun. But this spirit that you feel, like this spirit of, and what it is a spirit of curiosity, right? It's a spirit of curiosity, and it's really fun because it's this sense of lightheartedness. You're excited about getting to know another person. You're like, man, I want to kind of see what we have in common. That feeling, that's why we love working with students, right? Because, you never know what they're bringing to the table, right? And it's always fascinating and interesting, or it should be, because if it feels dull, well, then that's on you, right? That's on you. It should feel kind of exciting. As tough as sometimes the beginning of the school year is, and you're going through all these things, sometimes it's the most fun because you're getting to learn all these new different individuals that you're working with, and you're getting to, in some ways, play what you're playing now and identifying things that you maybe have in common or just really cool things about them. I have this guy this semester that he started a duck call business out of Edmond. He started, him and a couple buddies started a duck call business. They make duck calls by hand. It started getting some reputable people buying it. He happened to be in New York, went to a company there in New York, and they loved him. And so now him and some buddies have a relationship with a company out of New York that they ship their duck calls to for people to buy. Like that type of stuff. My dad loves to duck hunt, so guess who I'm buying a duck call from this trip? Matthew. So it's cool, right? It's fun. And sometimes this is the best thing you can offer a student too, because they're so used to grinding, right? We know that their success is important. We want them to achieve. We know there's a lot to accomplish. But sometimes they just come in thinking it's just going to be task, right? And we're not taking away the importance of those things. But a lot of that really starts with some of this, and you can do this pretty quickly. That was just 2 or 3 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes. It wasn't very long. Can you recreate that when you see students every 3 or 4 minutes, right? Just in a casual way. So it's a great way to start building this connection, building this trust, and I think it's what keeps your work alive. It's what keeps your work alive. It's why I can still sit down all day, every day with 18-year-olds for 11 years in this capacity. Because it's new, and every student's different, and I love that. Because every day feels different, every meeting should feel different. All right, so this next part of the model, the inviting invitation. Listening, right? As simple as it is for Sherry Cole's basketball team to go back and practice dribbling because they know that. For us, we know the importance of listening. But guess what we have to do? We have to go back and practice listening. We have to do it because it's so important. You can see there's some different types of listening up here referenced. Self-referential, what's that?
How does this relate to me?
That's right. Right? It's all about you, really. It's that friend who every time you talk to them, and the next thing you know, they're really just telling you about their life, about that particular situation. It's not bad. I'm not saying it's bad. That's not the listening we're going for. Right? Fix it. Right? The fix it listening. All right, I'm listening to your problems because I got a lot of solutions for you. Like, my mom is so good at that. Still good at it. I'm like, Mom, I'm the coach. I know what you're doing. Why did you do that listening? Superficial. I mean, we live in the world now of superficial listening. And what is the number one cause of superficial listening? Phone. Phone. I mean, I hope that you don't have a cell phone anywhere near and making any noises when you're meeting a student. I hope that you don't. But yeah, that feeling when you're talking to somebody, my brother-in-law, I mean, I love him, man. He's like my best friend. But I don't know how many conversations I have with him that he's not looking down a little bit. That's fine. And I can harass him about it. But, it's not what we're going for. But what we are going for, and what we get trained in coaching, is called engaged listening. And it's called level 2 listening, all right? You're like, oh, what does level 2 listening mean? Well, here you go. I got a good slide for it. All right, level 1 listening. This is when you're listening for the sake of yourself. This is some of that self-referential, some of that distracted kind of listening, things like that. But what we're going for, and I want you to think of this in this way, you can be helpful, because we refer to this in our office. Like, I have a couple team leaders on my staff. Charles is one of them. And they will do things that just remind, like, hey, what are we doing level 2 listening? And when we say level 2, what we're doing is we're listening from the perspective of the other person speaking. We're in this mode, because guess what you were doing in that game on connection? You were probably doing pretty good level 2 listening, because you were curious and you had a lot of intention of learning about that other person to see if there was anything you had in common, right? And it really engages that, all right? And so this level 2 listening, when it is occurring, you know it. When somebody is really listening to you, do you know it? Because you know why? It feels different. It feels so different when somebody's in that place of level 2 listening, when you're like, man, like, they're all about me. Like, they are all about me. All right? So what we're going to do is we're going to practice this. All right? We're just going to do a quick practice and give everybody a chance to do a little level 2 focused listening. All right? So you can see up here, I want you to, each person is going to share either a current personal or professional goal that you'd like to work towards by the end of this, say, semester, right? By the end of this semester. So one person's going to be the coach, and one person's going to be the coachee in this example, all right? The coach can only do level 2 listening, all right? The hard part is, as the coach, you can't say a word. All you can do is sit there and listen, while the other person is sharing with you, hey, here's my personal goal, professional goal this semester, here's what I'm thinking, this is why. You're the person who's speaking, you can expand on all of your goal, because this person isn't going to talk back at you, they're just going to listen the whole time. So you just go for it. Share as much as you want. And then we're going to switch. So when you hear the bell, then you know to switch. Okay? So listen for that real high-end, expensive bell we got. All right? So listen for that bell, and you switch. All right? So we're going to go. I'm not going to make it too painful. All right? I'm not going to make you do this for 5 minutes each. Okay? I'm not going to do it too painful. I'm just going to have you go. I'm going to have you go just for 1 minute each. 1 minute each. You just got to listen for 1 minute. All right? Go. Exaggerated form, right? You're not going to just be there sitting like a robot listening, like that. Because I didn't tell you couldn't make nonverbal, right? Some of you were doing a great job. Like, I could tell, like, there were some people locked in. They were locked in. You could just tell. You know why? You can just so tell by somebody's nonverbals how well they're listening. Eye contact, body language, the way that they're shifting towards that person. They're usually leaning forward. You can tell when a person's really locked in. So, you can. I honestly think that a lot of times in coaching, I probably go without talking for, especially once you get to know students, quite a while sometimes. More than a minute for sure. That minute feel long? Yes. Some, maybe not, yeah. But how good, so for somebody like who felt like they were really getting listened to, how did that feel?
It just felt good. And it was interesting because I knew she wanted to affirm me and she couldn't.
No affirmation here.
It made me feel good that she was like, oh yeah, that's really cool or whatever. Yeah. I could feel that even though she wasn't saying it.
That is such a good point, right? How good is that? I mean, a student and another person can feel it without you saying anything. They can feel it. Don't trick yourself. Don't think that you're tricking them. Don't think that you're tricking them, because people haven't been listening to them their whole life, a lot of them, so they know what that feels like. It should feel different. It's a different muscle, right? It's a different muscle. That's all you're doing. That's all this drill does. It just exaggerates and puts some emphasis on this muscle. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's hard. And here's one of the things that we were taught and what we do when this gets hard, because when I'm sitting there with a student and they're sharing with me all their struggles in biology, 1124, and it's like Friday morning, and OU's got a big game on Saturday, I'm pretty distracted, all right? Plus I got a 63-year-old, so, who knows what's going on in their life, so we got our own life. We got our own stuff. We got things that are going well in our life, and we got problems, right? And that's okay. But it makes it sometimes hard for us to be in it, right? It's hard to be in that gauge listening with a student after student after student. I mean, I understand that. So here's what you can do. So sometimes when I feel myself drifting, I'm sitting with a student, they're talking, and then I'm thinking about how did we get beat by Kansas State? Right?
Thanks for bringing that up.
I'm so sorry. And I'm thinking about that. Here's what you can do. Here's a quick, simple little trick that gets you back locked into engaged level 2 listening. Is when that student is talking, you are saying every word that they are saying, not out loud, that would be weird. They're not going to come back to your office. But you're saying every word they're saying in your mind, and you're just repeating every single word right now that I am saying. You are saying that in your mind, and look, I mean, you're all locked in. I mean, you are zoned in, your eyes are on me, you're leaning forward. It locks you in, doesn't it? It locks you in pretty quick. So I do that a lot. There might be other tricks you have, there might be other things that you do, but that's a good way to do it. Questions on listening? Yes, sir.
That's just an observation. I found as both an instructor and a parent that ask a question and then be quiet gets you a lot more information.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Because people can't stand silence, and they feel like they need to fill it up with something.
Yeah, I mean, that's so good.
I want to say something too, that when you're deep level listening, you start to notice these other nonverbals that your students are giving you. So what were some of the nonverbals you noticed about each other when you were coaching each other?
Smile.
Smiling when they're talking. Okay. What else? What shifts sometimes in a conversation that you notice that there may be something else is going on there? Tone of voice. So they may say, yeah, I love this class, but they're like, yeah, I love this class. I noticed that there's a discrepancy. I noticed that there's a disconnect. I noticed that when you talk about a class you love, your voice speeds up and it gets louder. When you talk about stress, or when something comes through that may be stressful, you start to notice a shift, and that their energy maybe starts to drop, or they start to get quieter, they start to get muffled. So that's one of the ways that I keep, that's another, trick, is that repeating the word. That's a great trick that I've learned from Casey. Another one is locking in to watching the nonverbals and listening and kind of monitoring the energy of what they're saying, because that's pretty interesting and telling as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and eye contact that you mentioned. When I was coaching Teresa, when she said about losing confidence, I saw her eyes. They just seemed to get a little welled up. Not that she was going to start crying in front of everybody, but I could just tell. I could tell the emotion behind when she said, "I lose confidence." Right? That's why I went back to that, because I could tell emotionally it was connected to her. So yeah, good point, great point. And we say, are you giving people enough space? When you ask them a question, which we're getting into next, are you really giving them space to answer? Are you really creating that listening space? And that's what leads us to this prompting reflection, right? This powerful question. It's doing it a little bit different. It's what you notice.
Worked at an inpatient facility before, and they had a strong rule, which I think that would be really helpful to helpers or empaths. You know, you want to rescue people from going through something. And their rule is that if somebody started crying, not to do that thing where you hand them a tissue and you comfort them and you shh them, but really kind of let them experience that feeling. And I think for students, a lot of times, you can be empathetic and you can, you know, you show it in your face and you can nod that you're listening and you understand what they're going through without saying, well, that's okay, you know, we can do this and fix it, because they I think also need to know, especially if they're not doing what they need to be doing, I think they need to have that for a minute.
And it's not fair to you to say that's okay, that's okay, that's okay. It's not fair of you to say that to them.
Because it may not be.
Because it may not be okay.
And it doesn't feel
It
okay.
may not be okay. So yeah, great point, great example. I think that space and being able to just sit back sometimes and let them have that space to do what they need to do. And these powerful questions, so the greatest thing that powerful questions does in coaching is it draws out self-awareness, right? So when we said the coaching mindset and approach is to build more self-awareness in students, to allow them to grow, to understand themselves better, this is where that happens. It happens in this powerful question prompting reflection. Because when you ask an open-ended question, the student has to think for a second. They have to do this thing called critical thinking, right? They have to start thinking for themselves, like, I'm not sure, you know, like I need to think about this. Now, sometimes you can ask a great open-ended question and still get a one-word answer. You know, sometimes I think I nail a question and, you know, I still get a no. You know, it doesn't even make sense to go with my question. But you're a team. Okay. So we're trying to move in this direction of asking more questions, telling less. We do this in a few different ways. You can see here that curiosity comes in. These habits, and when I say these powerful questions, what you're trying to also do is ask questions that aren't just always about their actions forward. Like, it's not always just asking questions that's about solving a problem. Sometimes it's asking a question about, like, hey, how do you feel about this? Like, trying to ask questions and draw on how are they as a person in this, you know, relating to their challenge. So, you know, with Teresa, you know, it was asking a little bit about, like, how does she feel, you know, that self-confidence doesn't feel all that high when she's experiencing that. Because what that does is when somebody has a little bit of an emotional tie to something, for instance, it provokes motivation. Like, our motivation comes from when we really care about something, but when we really understand why we care about it, right? And so these powerful questions, they're open-ended. They're not advice in disguise. Hey, do you think you should go to tutoring? No. I mean, come on, right? We are all guilty of those, right? Because why? Because what have you created by doing that? You've asked, said, hey, do you think you should go to tutoring?
Guilt.
Maybe guilt,
Provoke them.
maybe some defensiveness, maybe some judgmentalness a little bit. It's not like you did anything bad by doing that. I've done that. You're going to do it sometimes. But it's just being aware of it, because you want these powerful questions to give them the space to kind of reflect on their particular situation. So here's some examples, right? Here's some examples. What is the most important outcome? I might think I know what the most important outcome is, but what's the most important outcome to them? You know, like we did with Teresa, what have you tried before? What's worked when you've been faced with a similar challenge like this? How's it worked, how's it not worked? You know, what if you knew you not fail, which is a little bit larger scale question. Sometimes it's simple as like, what's holding you back? I see that you've been consistently struggling in math, right? And I understand that math's not your favorite subject. I get that. And, you know, luckily, I mean, you're not an engineer major, so you don't have to go through Calc 4 or anything like that. I get it. But we still know that part of your degree plan is one level of math. And we've been struggling with a lot of growth in this area. We're now in October, we're still like, it hasn't gone. What is keeping you and holding you back from being more successful? What is it? And those answers will vary. But you know what you're going to start getting into is you're going to start getting into a little bit of fixed mindset. like I was born not to be good at math, like it's like a biological thing. I mean, you're gonna get into a lot of just effort because I don't care about math. So if I don't care about math, I don't really have a lot of motivation to put effort into it, right? I already have some things that have been said to me previously that I just wasn't ever gonna be good at math because that's what my 10th grade teacher said. Hey, math's not for you, don't choose a career in math. Right, so we got a lot, there's gonna be a lot to unpack. Not that you're necessarily solving all those things from the past, but what you're doing is you're trying to get at the point of like, hey, what's keeping you from being your best? Simple. We want you to be your best. You've told me what your best looks like. What's keeping you from being where you are? And how can I help you and support you to get there? Right? Same on the what does success look like, and some of the other ones there. So these are some examples. What do you notice about, what are some things that are sticking out about these questions?
You're asking the student what they think it
Okay.
is from their perspective.
From their perspective, what are the things you notice about these questions?
It's you or your.
Okay, yep. Yep, so open-ended, shouldn't be right. Yeah, but it's about kind of putting it back on them, like to reflect, okay?
Helps them internalize.
Helps them internalize, right? Anything else?
They're all reflective questions.
Okay. Yep, all reflective.
I think they're all working for the positive outlook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they all take on a positive approach towards something, right? For sure, that's a good point. You know what they also are? They're short and sweet for the most part. They're short and sweet. They're simple. They're short. They're sweet. They get to the point. They're not a paragraph of a question, and now the student's like, I have no idea what you just asked me. Right? That can happen. That was probably one of my biggest struggles when I first started coaching. It was like I would have all of these different questions in my mind, and I would just run them all together, or they would just be really long and complicated questions, right? And just simple, short, sweet, to the point questions. I mean, that really gets it going. All right, so now you get to do that. All right, so now you get to practice this. So same pair. So you each shared one of your goals, as personally or professionally, that you're trying to accomplish by the next semester. Now you actually get to ask questions to that person. And if you did that before, you cheated. So now you get to ask questions to the other person, and I want you to ask some powerful, simple, good, open-ended questions about what that person shared with their goal. Okay? All right, and we're going to do that like 2 minutes each, and then we'll switch. And when you hear the bell, switch, coachee, and then we'll come back. Sound good? All right, go. All right. Great. Good. Professional coaches out here. All right, what someone want to share what the experience was just trying to ask questions? Good, bad, what was it like?
I kept asking close-in questions.
Okay. Anybody else have that challenge a little bit? Okay. I'm sorry, you're the only one.
So it was hard to ask questions where I wasn't directing. And I was one of the people who asked open-ended questions the first time, so I had to come up with some new open-ended questions.
Hey, that's on you.
I know, it's all on me. But it was hard not to direct.
Right.
To just allow her to.
Yeah. That's good. That's really good point. Other people experience.
It just wasn't enough time for us to make it.
Yeah, that too.
Okay.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's just kind
Yeah, exactly. Okay, anybody else experience? Was it hard? Okay.
I think it was a good reminder because you're talking to somebody that you don't know about their experience, and so it's a good reminder to ask those questions like really genuinely for the interest of gathering more information, like curiosity, like you said. Because when we have somebody who's taken a class and we feel like we're familiar with that class or we're familiar with the instructor, but to really ask them about their unique experience with it.
Yeah, because it might be a very different experience for them. Yeah, very good. Was it hard not to like jump in and want to like tell them?
Yes.
Yeah, good.
A little different problem is that I kept, she's very interesting to listen to, and she kept generating questions in my head.
Oh,
I had
yeah.
to throttle back and I had to ask questions before she was finished,
Yeah.
because, she's just saying some really interesting things. So.
Yeah, well, that shows that you're doing a great job of level 2 listening too. Like, that's really good. Don't go home and start expecting.
It's a different workshop entirely.
Did you have something?
I'm gonna need you to read this material.
Oh, you can relate, right? We're all about making friends here. No, this is good. This is really good feedback, right? I mean, it's not, sometimes it is hard and sometimes it can feel a little clunky. I mean, even still for me sometimes, I'll have occasional days where I just kind of have an off day. It feels like, like none of my questions are necessarily coming out right. But you know what? I'm still trying to ask questions. And you know what that's better than? Not asking questions, right? So it's okay. You don't have to get it perfect. You don't have to have it down exactly right, but just the attempt. And the more practice, the better you get at it, and the easier it flows, and the simpler it comes. But I promise you, it's not going to happen if you're not doing level 2 listening. It's just not going to happen. The best powerful questions come from really great listening, because you asked them a question because you were listening so well that they didn't even think of it. Like that wasn't even like in the ballpark, and it just gives a little bit of sometimes a small little spark because you were doing such good listening that really catapults that person many steps ahead. So it's really cool, and it becomes kind of fun. And yeah, sometimes the hardest part is just slowing your questions down. Like when I was listening to Teresa, there was a million different, but there were several different questions I had, but I was still trying to do level 2 listening, so I was really having to exercise like holding back a little bit to ask her a question that I was honestly just kind of curious about. And that usually when I rely on that, that's what helps the most, if it's just kind of coming out of my curiosity to understand them better and to get to know them better and their situation, then usually if I hit that spot, it's usually pretty solid.
So does your curiosity, just generally speaking, have you ever had a student be like, this is nosy, or you're asking too much? You don't want to.
Casey, can I tell a story?
Yeah, you can tell.
So,
yeah, he runs.
One of the things when I first started coaching was asking the same question 3 different ways before they could answer. So I really appreciate you saying, ask the question and listen. Or in my mind, I say, shut up, Charles. So I was asking this student questions and I was listening. And he was going off, and finally I asked a question. He's like, "You ask a lot of questions. I'm done for today." That's what he said. He said that to me, and I said, "Good, we'll see you next time." But that was it. We were done. And guess what he did? Came back next time, right?
Yeah.
So it's okay if you're getting too probing, if you are going to a level that, like this student's like, "Am I in counseling? What's happening?" Right? Try and rein it in if you can. But if they say, "I'm done," respect that. Respect that.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I do. You don't want to be like rapid fire questions. That's you definitely don't want to be rapid firing questions. And so I usually don't run into that space, and maybe it's just because I practice a little bit of just kind of spacing out stuff. And you notice, I don't know if you noticed, but like even when I was doing Teresa, there was like some moments that I actually kind of like spoke to some stuff. Like I said, hey, we're always trying to climb up the mountain, I said, and sometimes we got to stop and reflect and look back. And what that does is it was just a short little couple of statements. It wasn't telling her anything to do. It was just acknowledging and speaking to like the emotional intelligence in the situation. And that created a little bit more space in the conversation, like an accordion, that then when I could ask another question, it didn't feel rapid fire, right? Because I put like a little bit of a filler in there that made sense and it fit the context of what we were doing really well. But it created it from this feeling of like just one after another. Yeah, because that's not going to go. That's not going to go good.
I have a question. So something I struggle with to stay engaged in listening is that when they first tell me something, my mind starts working on, well, here are the solutions. This is the drop deadline. You talked about delayed versus tutoring. And so like I'm already forming answers, and so that's what keeps me from listening further.
Right.
How do I fix that?
Well, I'm going to say that you probably have done a good job of listening sometimes. When you feel like you have been in a good zone of listening, what have you done? How's it been different?
I don't know.
But that's where I would start.
Yeah. I guess when I can just turn my brain off and just stay engaged in listening.
And what-
then address things later. Or just thinking, maybe just one thing of like, okay, make a list in my head of, we're gonna talk about this first, and then we're gonna address this, and we're gonna address this.
And what have you done to turn your brain off? When you've successfully turned your brain off, what have you done?
I usually change my position in my chair.
Okay.
Like I might lean forward a little bit, or I might like actually put like a pen in my hand so I can focus on like fiddling it, so my brain will focus on listening.
Right.
For any of you ADD people, that's a good trick.
Right.
Just something like that. So it's like, okay, quit making up solutions already or answering questions in your head, and just stay engaged with listening.
So right there, that's a 1-minute coaching session. She knew her problem. She knew the problem. She asked me to fix it. She asked me to fix it because that's what students want. She knows the answer.
Yeah.
She knows how to do it. So, but that's great. It's great.
What do you do, when you have a student and, that answers things and you don't wanna put, advice in its guide?
Yeah, so she's asking, what do you get when the student's kind of giving you the I don't know? Right? You probably never had that happen. But yeah, when the I don't know happens, then typically when that happens the first time, I might say, okay, well, let me maybe ask it in a different way. But if I start getting a little bit of a pattern of I don't know, well, then that starts telling me that maybe they don't want to be there. So then I'll say, hey, like, I feel like I'm trying to ask you some questions. I'm really curious. I really want to help you, and I want to help you move forward. But I kind of feel like you're maybe not, I don't know if you're here right now with that. Is this what you want to be doing? Because your responses seem like maybe you necessarily don't want to be here right now. And maybe there's a better time that we can do this, or another time. Like, tell me a little bit more, because you're responding with a lot of I don't knows, and that's not helping you make progress. So what can we do? So I just acknowledge it. If I'm feeling like it's starting to be a little bit of a more pattern of what would be defensiveness, of kind of like, hey, my wall's up, I don't know, I don't really want to be here, there's a million other things I want to do. Okay. Well, like we said, coaching is a two-way street. I'll meet you where you're at. And if I'm getting that feeling and that's where you're at, let's talk about it. And if that's where you're at, then maybe, you know what? Okay, well then, hey, what's causing you to feel that way today? Like, and would it be better if we met at a different day and time for you? That would be helpful. Versus me trying to force it. That's not going anywhere. Yeah, so let's tell me to come back with the answer. That'd be good. Up here, these are some less effective questions, and you all have hit on several of these. What do you think seeking the one true question is?
Finding the root of the issue?
What's that?
Finding the actual issue?
Yeah. What do you think? So seeking the one true question, a lot of times what happens when you get into coaching a little bit is you think you have the question that you are just sitting on while you're listening to them, and it's going to just solve everything for them. Right? And like, man, once I ask this question, this is going to be the epiphany that I live for in my work. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you get caught in that trap, it's going to be a sad day. Right? Rambling questions. Right? That's what I was speaking to earlier. They just kind of like ramble and build on top of each other. You kind of see up there in the neglecting to interrupt. Why do I have that up there? Why do you think neglecting to interrupt is up there?
Sometimes they answer the question that you didn't ask, and you need to drive that conversation towards another, more maybe serious direction.
Okay, yeah. And you're on the right path. A lot of times, as all of us, we like to avoid talking about the matter that is at hand or that matters the most. And so a lot of times what can happen is a student you're intending and you start talking about something, but then they don't really want to talk about biology. And the next thing you know, you're learning about their family reunion in Missouri and all of their aunts and uncles and nephews, and you're like, man, what is happening here? Where are we? Right? It's your responsibility in those moments to listen, but you got to rein it back in. You got to say, hey, that's awesome. I love that you had a great family reunion trip. But hey, just to recenter us real quick, I want to make sure that, because I know we only got a little bit of time. We only got 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. So I want to make sure that we're still making progress to help you. You got to kind of rein that conversation in a healthy way That's what we mean. Like neglecting to interrupt, that's on you. Like if that student rambles for 30 minutes and they leave, you're like, man, they just totally avoided it and they're out like, yes. They avoided the conversation. So kind of bringing it back sometimes. Obviously, interrupting goes without saying. Why questions?
They can answer, I don't know.
Okay? What other things when I ask why questions, what can I do? Feel judgmental. It can create a defensive posture. Are why questions always bad? No. When could you use a good why question?
Why do you want to take this class? Why are you choosing this major? Why-
Okay, yeah, trying to discover, right? You can ask why questions like, hey, I'd love to learn a little bit more of why you decided to come to the University of Oklahoma.
Well, you can't look back.
That might set them on a different path. I also think why, you know what why can get at too, that can be useful, is sometimes it can get a little bit to, in a healthy way, like their motivation. Right? It can, if you're seeing them consistently struggle, and you're seeing them, hitting a wall over and over, a why question can sometimes bring it to say, why is this? Why is all that you're trying to do? Why is it worth it to you? Right? Because it's hard. Right? What you're trying to do is hard. It's hard being a pre-med student. And it's hard having to take science after science. And I know that you've been up against a wall over and over. Why is this worth it to you? Because if they don't understand why it's really worth it to them, and they can't articulate it, well then that's some real discovery that needs to be done. Right? And where is that coming from? So why questions are not bad, but they got to be used in a pretty intentional, concise way. All right, then finally, inspiring action. All right, so in the model, this is where it kind of moves towards at some place in the model towards the end. And one thing I want to speak to about the model also is, in a perfect world, we've gone through the model. In a coaching session with a student, does it go through that perfect model like that way always? No. Sometimes a student comes in and boom, they're telling you all these things that they're going to do to fix their problem in math. They just hit you, right? They just hit you with like, yeah, I didn't do good on my last math test. I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this. And you're like, oh, okay, whoa. So sometimes I have to back them up a little bit. Like sometimes I have to hit the reverse a little bit in the model in my mind. Say, okay, like, oh, hold on, let me see where we're at. Let's talk about it a little bit, and then we can maybe make some progress. But what we're ultimately trying to do is help them take action. Why? Why do we want them taking action? To get better, right? One of the things we said, we want you to get better. The way you get better is taking action, right? And these are the things it does. That's why we always say it's just a good conversation if they didn't leave with some sort of action. And I'm not telling you that you can't have a student leave your office without action, but I am going to encourage you to say the majority of the time you want them to leave with action. It's important. It helps them to move forward. Growth mindset, of course. Their values lead to their actions. I had a student in my office yesterday that was kind of been thinking about pre-med, or is pre-med, and he said, I'm reconsidering pre-med. And then he paused and he said, I've realized there's some different things that I'm not sure by being a doctor I'm going to have the quality of time with my family that I really want. And that spoke to his value, right? And that's what I was able to speak to, say, I love that, Austin. I think what you're speaking to is something that you value and you see yourself valuing down the road. And that's awesome. And that can help you lead to making good decisions. Okay? Right. One of the things, too, you see on here, focus on the process. And this is hard. I tell my group, I don't like Alabama football at all, for a lot of reasons. But their coach, Nick Saban, he always says, I remember hearing this like 5 years ago. I was like, oh man, that's okay. He always says, here at Alabama, we focus on process. What does he mean by that? What does he mean? Hey, we're focused on the process.
They're not looking towards the end.
They know where they want to be at the end. But you know what they're really focused on? Is the day in, day out of our process of how we're getting better. Right? it's very easy to get caught up so much just on the accomplishments and things like that, and those are great, that's where we're going. Well, what's our process getting there? And even helping students frame it in that way to say, hey, I love where you want to be in December. I think at 3.0 or better in December is awesome for your first semester in college. So we're going to focus in these sessions on the process of getting there. And let's think of it as a process, because it doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey. In our relationship working together in this coaching capacity, it's a journey together in a process to help you to become that version of you that you see in December. And I think that's awesome, and we can get there, but it's a process of getting there. All right, so that is how you get to action. All right, so now you get to do it. So you've been working in these pairs. You've done a great job listening. Well, first of all, you did a great job getting to know each other. And then you did a great job listening. And then you got to ask some questions, right? And now these questions, I'm assuming, were already starting to lead to what action are you going to take to the goal that you mentioned. So I want every person to ask some questions, do the skills we've been talking about, and maybe have one thing they're going to do to move towards that action or move towards that goal using an action, right? So he's going to be quick, all right? Got about a minute, and then we'll switch. And then wrap it up. You did.
Yes,
Okay.
she kind of talked about how she was going to take baby steps towards the bigger picture.
Right.
Because you kind of discussed how it's easier to do that instead of trying to go for the ultimate goal without taking those steps.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So that made me think about slowing down the process and actually doing it in sections.
Yeah.
Trying to get control of it.
It's great. It's great. Good work. Yes, sir.
Tisha has a task to take care of everyone, so maybe it's time for a catch. She has work to do.
She got work to do. He's got her action. Yeah, you can share. You said it back there.
Well, yeah, I mean, as we were talking and, we're just originally talking about my goal, she helped me realize that, I might need to do a little follow-up on Monday to accomplish that goal before the end of the year.
Great. Brian, that's like 6 or 7 minutes. Go,
Okay.
yeah, go for it.
So, she was having to declutter her house, and so time has kind of gotten in the way of sitting aside of some time to actually do that. So her action step would be to go through her closet, taking a section at a time, and then make piles of things she would like to donate, keep,
Okay.
and then, donate or yard sale, so.
Great. How did that feel to you? Yeah. Do you feel like you have a clearer vision of how to move forward now than you did before you showed up today? Yeah. That was what, 5, 6 minutes? One of the things sometimes we get feedback in is, even on our campus, when we kind of do some of this stuff, we don't have time to coach. You don't have time to coach. You kidding me? You can't do that. Come on. Come on, we got time to coach. You got time to advise. You got time to talk to somebody. You got time to listen to them. It's not so much a thing you do as something that you become, and it's just how you operate, right? It's not this like separate thing, and like, oh, now I got to go be a coach for a little while. I'm like, no, that's just how you operate. And as an academic advisor as well, in the first 2 years of our coaching program, we were not academic advisors. And I had a colleague who knew more than I did at the time. He said, I think this program is going to work a lot more effectively if we become advisors. And he had different reasons for it. And I was like, I don't know. But we did it. And we are better advisors because we're coaches. And we are better coaches because we're advisors. And that's why we love the blended model. And I'm still not saying it has to be a blended model. But the thing about it is you've just gone over 4 fundamentals: trust, listening, powerful questions, and designing action. Do you have to hire anybody to do those things? Do you have to start some massive coaching program to do any of those things? No, you don't. You can do all of those things in your office on Monday with your staff, with your students, with your colleagues, anybody. You can do these fundamentals in a way that can move towards some pretty cool, transformative work even if it's just a little bit at a time. All right, so it's really encouraging. Hopefully you'll feel really hopeful in it. We're gonna get to do a little bit more practicing this afternoon in a larger way where you have a little bit more time to really try to exercise those muscles a little bit more. Any questions before lunch? I didn't think so. All right. Yeah.